I used to be a tour guide when I lived in Edinburgh. I loved everything about the city, the history, the tales of revelry, and, of course, the ghost stories. I worked for a company who ran ghost walks down to the underground parts of the city. I would take a group, mainly tourists, down to the woods under the South Bridge and regale stories of hooded figures, love-lorn ghouls, and malevolent poltergeists. I didn't believe a word of it myself, not until last year. The night had started like any other. I met the group outside St. Giles Church, collected tickets, and introduced myself to the night's participants. I had to give them a little safely briefing before heading down into the vaults, and while I was waffling on about watching your step and turning off phones, I often took a good look at the collection of people in front of me. Tonight, I noticed there was a small child in the group. She must have been about 5 or 6, and I felt a little uneasy about taking her on the tour. After I had finished my little introduction, I took the child's mother to one side and asked if the girl would be okay with the dark and dank corridors of the woods and indeed the ghostly tales I would be telling. She assured me that she would be fine and that they often went on ghost walks together in different cities. It was like their little hobby. A strange hobby for such a little girl, I thought. But reassured that the child wouldn't get scared, I continued with the tour. To get to the vaults, I had to take the group down a seldom used alleyway and through a locked door. Our company had the only keys and so could boast a completely unique experience for our customers. The door opened to a series of stone steps leading down into the dark heart of the city. Being underground, the vaults were like caves with stalactites and dripping ceilings throughout. I had to use a torch to light the way, and of course for dramatic effect. The further down you journeyed, the darker it got. Until the last vault, which was like a darkness I would never know, it seemed to engulf you. You wouldn't be able to see someone standing right in front of you. I took the group into several underground rooms, and in each room spun a different yarn. I told them of the dire conditions the inhabitants would have endured, stories of brave Scottish builders refusing to work down in the vaults, and tales of Canadian backpackers emerging from the dark covered in scratches. My dramatic torch light and the occasional sound of a car passing overhead was ramping up the tension nicely, all in preparation for the big finale. I led everyone into the final vault, making sure the little girl and her mother were still okay. To this point, they had been following the group, staying near the front. The girl had been holding her mother's hand obediently and hadn't shown any fear or even nervousness at the very dark conditions. Walking into this room, however, I could see a change in the girl's face. She seemed uneasy, I think. I ushered the group into the middle of the dark vault and prepared to tell the very last tale, the legend of the South Bridge entity. Supposedly there was a poltergeist haunting this last room, a malevolent being that hated the tourists and would do anything it could to be rid of them. It would scratch, leave bite marks, and even render people unconscious. I, for one, had never experienced anything of the sort, and neither had anyone on a tour of mine. But I had heard many stories, and it wasn't hard to modify one to scare the group. Just as I began to tell my tale, the torch in my hand went out. This had never happened before. I searched in my pockets for my spare, but for the life of me couldn't find it. There were whispers filtering around the group. Is this supposed to happen? I bet it's part of the tour. I decided to carry on with the story to make the most of the eerie feeling that was building amongst the tourists, to use the suffocating darkness to my advantage, and I could use the torch on my phone to light the room once I had finished. But I didn't get past the first few words when a blood-curdling scream filled the air. Who was that? Are you okay? I tried to be calm and take control of the situation, but panic was spreading through the group. A panicked voice came back. My hand! I think there's blood! I fumbled around trying to find my phone in my bag. I silently cursed the company for making everyone turn off theirs. Don't worry, everyone, stay where you are. I'm trying to... The voice rang out again. My daughter! Where's my daughter? Just as the group was starting to jostle around, hands outstretched, searching the dark for the way out, my rummaging hand felt the smooth edges of my phone and I flicked on the torch as quickly as I could. Light seemed to flood the chamber and I could at least see the pale faces of the group, all looking around to find their loved ones and friends. The first thing I noticed was her hand. The mother of the little girl was holding her arm away from her. Blood dripped from an open gash across her palm and several small red and angry cuts ran up her wrist. Her eyes locked onto mine in horror. Where was the girl? My eyes searched the room. Despite the light from my phone, I could barely make out the edges of the cavernous vault. I moved closer to the huge stone walls and put my hand out to steady myself. The girl couldn't have gone far. I moved the light around and once again asked everyone to remain calm. The light was reached into the far right corner of the cave. The group was getting worried. It was then I heard a whispering. It seemed to echo around the chamber and made everyone stop, still and silent. It was coming from the other corner of the vault. Holding the phone torch at arm's length, I could just make out a shadowy figure hunched in the corner. With some trepidation, I moved toward it. Getting closer, I could see dark patches on the wall above the figure. They were too dark to be water. They shone in the torchlight as I got nearer, began to glint red. The whispering, continuous and unclear, began to decrease in volume until I wasn't entirely sure I would ever heard it all, and then the figure began to move. I realized that I was looking at it. The little girl was hunched over, back as far into the corner as she could. My chest felt tight as I reached out a hand and placed it on her shoulder. I crouched down to get a closer look at the child. Are you okay? What are you doing way over here? Someone took my hand. They led me here. As she turned to face me, I could see that, bizarrely, the girl didn't seem threatened at all. Did you think it was your mommy? I figured that maybe someone was trying to make sure she was out of harm's way. No, don't be silly. Oh, why is that silly? I asked. Well, because, she started. The girl stood in torchlight. I could make out a smile on her face. She seemed okay, but something about her didn't feel right. Her eyes were darker, or she was taller than before. Then she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. Because my mommy doesn't have clothes.